No matter what developmental level your children are at, nature has something to offer. And we can put natural stuff in their environments to invite them to explore.
Hi, this is Rusty Keeler, and you're listening to the Play Nature Podcast, where we talk about play, nature, playing in nature, and the nature of play. I'm glad you're here. Let's have a listen.
All right. Hello again. Rusty Keeler here, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me in the Play Nature Podcast, episode 3. All right, we're moving along now. Yeah, and today's podcast is going to be about natural playscapes. Natural playscapes. You know, kind of my 3 big pillars here are nature play, natural playscapes, risky play, and loose parts play. That's kind of the foundation here, kind of the different directions that we'll go. But today is about natural playscapes, landscapes for play, and what they are, how to build them, how to do some projects, how to talk to licensing about it, and yeah, what are the benefits? And what are natural playscapes? We're going to go deep into that direction, and at the end, I will read off and give you a few quick projects, quick natural playscape projects that you can try simply in your own backyard, play space. And then I'll answer 3 questions from you. So at the very end, I will answer the question of desert natural playscapes. What types of storage sheds are good for natural playscapes? And then licensing and rocks. Yeah. We'll get into that at the end. But first, natural playscapes. What are natural playscapes? Here's what natural playscapes aren't. Kind of standard. Picture a playground with monkey bars and swings and a big piece of fixed play equipment and rubber surfacing. That's not a natural playscape. This idea of landscape for play is where the playscape is, a landscape, is a living environment. And instead of being filled with fixed equipment, it could still have some pieces of fixed equipment, but it's also filled with natural stuff, like hills and trees and sand and water and mud and rocks and gardens and herbs and mess and loose parts and logs. The list goes on and on. Yeah. And I will say, some of my very favorite natural play spaces, playgrounds in general, don't even have any play equipment. You know, and it's okay. If you got play equipment, that's fine. We can keep naturalizing. We can think about how we can naturalize the corners and the little spaces around it. But a lot of places are doing amazing things with natural spaces and having no equipment at all. And they're rich, diverse, endless possibilities for play and learning and development. And in many ways, those kind of environments are more home-like, more like a backyard, maybe like your backyard. And I work with a lot of childcare centers, schools, parks, too, but a lot of childcare centers. And I've done work with family childcare, home-based childcare. And in a way, they have it best of all because they are already home-like feeling, right? It's homey. It's a backyard. And it might have a storage shed. It might have gardens. It might have grass already. Some of those big centers where there's dozens of children or hundreds of children, they're doing their best to try to make a homey backyard feeling. So that's kind of what natural play spaces are all about. Thinking about, okay, well, how can we bring in natural materials that make it feel like a nature area, like a backyard? Really, I'm interested in, places that are different. Every play space should be different depending on where it is. Is it in the desert? Is it by a beach? Is it in the mountains? Is it up north in the cold? Or is it in the tropics? And what are the materials? Is it wild boulders in Alaska? Or is it beachy sand play spaces in Key West, in Florida? Yeah, I feel like a natural playscape, all playscapes should be a reflection for children of the place where they live. And I think that's some of the beauty of a natural playscape. I want to myself and inspire you to create outdoor spaces that are real, that connect children to the earth, to the real stuff. Because that's the beautiful stuff. It's like humans connecting to nature. We are nature. And children know that, and maybe it's easier for them, to have that connection to nature. And I want to put children in the cycles of the seasons so that you feel it, you live it, to really be in spring. Now here in Ithaca, New York, we're getting excited because winter is shifting into spring. And so everything's different and it feels different. And so I love the idea of a living playscape, a living environment for children where they can experience that too. The essence of the seasons. It's one thing to read about spring in a book, or play a spring game in an app on an iPad, or watch a movie about spring. And it's a whole different deal when suddenly your outdoor play space, your outdoor classroom is bursting into blossoms from the apple trees or the cherry trees, and fragrances in the air, and suddenly things are greening up, and there's a new sound of birds that are back, if they're away for the winter, and it's a whole body, whole spirit, whole soul experience. And that's the beauty of having a natural environment. So it's more like a forest. Like what happens in spring in the forest? What happens in autumn, winter, summer? Same with fields. Maybe a natural play space is more field-like, meadow-like. Or maybe it's more beach-like if you're near a beach. How do you weave in those elements and aspects? Or a farm. Maybe it's farmy with loose materials and hills and animals. Or maybe it's your backyard and how you weave all that stuff into your backyard. But I love that idea of offering for children living environments, putting them in environments that are alive, that are changing, that are growing, that are inviting wildlife in, butterflies, birds, bugs, and that there's dirt in there, there's earth. It's like, where are we living? We're living on a planet. What is it? Children are curious. They are filled with wonder, curiosity. So let's give them environments where they can explore, they can dig, they can ask those questions and find out answers and have a relationship with that living environment. Dirt, change, life, and death too. Yeah, it's all part of our lives. And it's all part of what I think children should have the opportunity to connect with, to ask the questions and learn and grow and explore. Right? Yeah, I think so. And that idea of aliveness, of life in the play environment, real stuff, maybe a little bit of mess, is a nice balance to all the man-made stuff in all of our lives, right? Man and woman-made. So many things are slick, smooth surfaces, slick toys, walls at right angles, smooth surfaces, antiseptic, cool, smooth surfaces versus living environments, messy environments, changing environments, evolving environments, changeable, where children can change the environments. And it's for all ages. No matter what developmental level your children are at, nature has something to offer. And we can put natural stuff in their environments to invite them to explore. Babies too. I think natural environments are best for babies. You know, what's good for babies? Fresh air, blue sky, clouds, sun, grass, leaves, bird sounds. Yeah, they're taking it all in for the first time. So yeah, that sounds pretty good, right? Natural play spaces, living environments. Now, of course, you could be doing this kind of thing, and I'm sure you are. And what's it like then if you are in childcare or school? You know, one of the big factors often is licensing. Oh, what's licensing going to say? So many people that I work with, you have to deal with that, right? Whether it's, you know, your normal playground, are you following playground safety guidelines? Or if you're doing natural play, what's safe, what's not safe? What do they think is safe or not safe? And regulations and parenting and parents. So there's more than just like being a believer in natural playscapes, because in this day and age, we need to also be good communicators about natural play spaces, about natural play, about play. So licensing is, you know, one of the big pieces of the puzzle. And we'll go deeper in this podcast. You know, as we get going in more podcasts, we'll dive into licensing deeper and have conversations about it and have some conversation with licensors too. But it's us to be able to form our reasoning, form our beliefs, get solid in what we believe in. What do we stand for with children's play and with the environments that we create for our children, and why? And there's plenty of research out there to say why natural play and connecting to nature is beneficial for children. So we can use those kind of words and research to communicate why we're doing these things. Now, I've heard all sorts of stories of licensing, you know, that don't let you do this or don't let you do that. And I've heard from people who work with licensors and communicate well and have great relationships, and they do all sorts of wild, risky play, natural play stuff. But I've gotten emails from, a lot of times it's universities, who say, hey, we got tree roots. They want to take our trees out because there's exposed roots. And licensing thinks it could be a tripping hazard. What do we do? So I often, send me a picture. Let's have a look at it, see what's going on. And more often than not, the tree roots are like a natural playscape feature dream come true, where it's like these neat roots that are right exposed, and you can have your little Hot Wheels cars or plastic dinosaurs in there, and it's like a perfect thing. And if licensors are worried about tripping hazards, well, you know what? The whole world is a tripping hazard, right? I mean, everything. And so, a lot of this with risky play and nature play and roots in our play space, like we want children to be able to navigate the world. A lot of this is mindfulness. If there's roots, if there's a log, if there's, stuff in the environment, children have to be keyed in. They have to be mindful. And that's what we want as they navigate your play space and navigate the roots and navigate the world. So, and another thing I think, thinking about, like, say, a tree root thing, often if there's like these awesome tree roots where there's plastic dinosaurs and, Hot Wheels cars or little fairy huts built in, like that's like a key feature. So everybody knows that there's roots there, and you have to be mindful. Now, with all this stuff, you have to think, when the designer cap comes on, of like, okay, where is that? Where are the roots, or where are the boulders? You don't want them in like a running area, soccer area, kind of where there's lots of action, or near a playground equipment where you could, fall on it. We've got to watch out for hazards. So it's a lot of, placement, thinking about placement. But maybe if you have roots, you want more, quote, quote, tripping hazards. You put more logs in, more branches in, because that's like life. That's connected to the woods. That's navigating life. But you need to be able to explain it, and we'll dive into that in other episodes here. But licensing in general, and talking to parents, the same thing. Ways to kind of just, I always say, like, the way to get around licensing is to follow the rules, right? You follow the rules. And with natural play spaces, it is very easy to meet and exceed federal playground safety guidelines. You know, a lot of stuff's left up to the licensor, and they're kind of making judgments. So they can measure, measure, okay, your playground equipment has 6 feet around it, it's not too close to the fence, there isn't a boulder within that safety zone around it. So they're making judgments about your playground and your placement and stuff like that. But they're also making judgments about you. Does this person know there's a boulder on their play space? I mean, they're trained to make sure there's no rocks, there's none of that kind of stuff, there's nothing hazardous. But they're wondering, okay, do they know what they're doing? Or is this an accident? So really, when I hear the great stories about, conversations with licensors, you're really helping licensors out by saying what your beliefs are and why you have logs in there, why you love those routes, what the children are learning, how they're balancing, how they're navigating the world, how they're accessing risk, how they're being resilient if they do trip and they get back up. So it's really that communicating. So the licensor need to think, okay, do these people know what they're doing? Or is this all an accident? Or is it mindful? Are you doing it mindfully? So the best places where they're doing risky play and all sorts of natural things, they're good communicators with their licensing and saying, hey, here's why I'm doing it. Here's the research behind it, why I'm doing it. Here's how I keep it as safe as necessary. Here's my safety precautions. Here's how we are supervising and all that kind of stuff. And here's our risk-benefit analysis. We'll go deeper into risk-benefit analysis in another later episode because that's a whole thing. But it's basically the idea of like seeing something like a boulder or a log and saying, in the old days it was like, uh-oh, that's a risk, that's a hazard. You could fall, you could poke your eye out, you could chip your tooth, you could break an arm. And of course, we don't want any of that stuff, so we say no. The regulator says no, the director says no, we don't want any of that stuff. But now we're doing risk-benefit analysis of said log, said stone, said tree roots. And then we're saying, okay, here are the risks. You could trip, you could fall, you could, this, that, and the other thing. But here are the benefits. Here are the reasons why we want to have this stuff in. The balance, the coordination, the self-esteem, the accomplishment, the fun, the groundedness, the mindfulness, and you start listing those things. And so suddenly you're looking at the risks, you're not ignoring them, but you're also looking at the benefits. And that's what you can talk to your licensor about, or your spouse in your backyard, or your grandparent, or neighbors, or people at the park who are wondering why you're letting your child go up the slide. Well, here's why. Here are the benefits. All right. So back to natural play spaces. Okay, so we kind of got a little of the philosophy there. But then we can also think about actually, okay, the practical stuff. And, the theme of this podcast is dream big, start small, and never stop. So the same goes with natural play spaces. So we dream it up, and so the dream could be you want a totally natural play space, hills and trees and sculpture and sand pits and mud kitchens. And so you dream up, that's the dream. Or a dream might be, if you have fixed playground equipment now, the dream may be to have natural play space, play elements kind of added, supplements to your more commercial playground. And then the other dreaming it up could be to have an actual design, a master plan. You come up with a plan, you're dreaming it. Because then we're going to start small, but say even with a plan. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere with me, where you're listening, it's, spring coming, up here we like our spring projects. So, first having a plan of what your design's going to be, and then you can start picking off projects, selecting projects to do. And so that's the beauty of kind of looking at your yard and coming up with a whole plan for it. I see how everything fits and flows together. Oh, the mud kitchen's going to go over here. The trike track's going to go over there. The outdoor classroom's going to be over there. The tree root area is going to be over there. And then you know how it's all going to fit and flow together so that you start picking projects. You start small. You pick an easy, fun project that you can plan. We're going to do a mud kitchen, so let's plan it out. Where can we get materials? Who do we know that can help us build? Where can we do it? Where can we get a little money? And then building it, and then letting the children play with it. So this is the starting small. You observe, see what the play is like. Oh, is that working? Is that working how we thought? You have the loose parts, you add the loose parts, and then you tweak it. And then you plan the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. That's the never stopping. Yeah, so speaking of small projects, here's some small projects you might be interested in trying. I'm all about planting trees. And if just one of you dear listeners, planted a tree because of this podcast, I would feel like it is a total success. I've been successful. Yeah. So maybe this season you can plant a tree. And if you've never planted a tree before, that's okay. It's relatively easy. There's a few things you got to make sure to do. But I bet there's somebody that you know in your circle, either of fellow staff or spouse or family, friends, community, that know how to plant a tree. And certainly there's businesses in your community that know how to plant a tree, so they could help you too. And certainly you can look on YouTube and there's lots of videos about how to plant a tree. Maybe I'll make a video about planting a tree sometime. So, when you plant a tree, you want to think about, especially with, you don't have lots of time for maintenance and everything. One of the ways to help yourself is to plant native trees. Trees that know how to live in your climate, in your area. And they're easier to care for. They know the water, they know what the sunlight, they know what the seasons are like in your area, and they're used to it. So that makes it easier to care for. And then when you're thinking about trees to select, think about seasonal interest. Yeah. What does it look like in spring? You're celebrating spring. Does it change? Does it have blossoms? Does it have fragrance? Does it have color? Does it have fruit? Does it have things that could be for play, like seed pods? And then how about fall? Does it change color in fall? You can paint your outdoor play space in autumn by the color of the leaves of the trees that you choose to plant. In fall, one of my favorite play spaces here in Ithaca, it's completely yellow. Yellow leaves up above, and then yellow leaves are falling down, and then yellow leaves are covering the entire play space. It's beautiful. And it's so different than it was in the summer. It's so different than it was in the spring, and it's so different than it was in the winter too. Okay, so tree. Here's another project. Garden bed. Yeah. Just have a garden bed. And you could just make it with 2x4s, 2x6s. Again, go to YouTube, how to build a garden bed. You could buy garden beds. You could buy galvanized, kind of those drinking, like horse drinking, what are they, troughs? Yeah. And fill that with dirt and grow your stuff. And you could have some garden, maybe you start with one, but maybe you do a few. And some could be just for digging. You don't even have to plant in there. That is just a garden bed filled with dirt, and you dig. And maybe that's a great thing. If you have fixed equipment and a total, more of a rubberized surface, we'll start putting some garden beds out there filled with dirt. You could have one filled with dirt, one filled with sand, one filled with, wood chips, other materials, and just let them dig. But garden beds can also be used to garden. So, yeah, you could have some garden beds that are for experiments with seeds to see what comes up. You could have garden beds that are growing food. You could have garden beds that are growing flowers. You could have garden beds that are growing materials that you can snip and clip and use in the mud kitchen for the concoctions. You can grow food. You can grow herbs, mint. And I'll tell you, I visit many schools and childcare centers, and they have garden beds, but maybe the teacher that was really the one behind it, they're not there anymore. So the garden bed is just full of weeds. And sometimes, the director might be like, oh gosh, look at it, it's all weedy, and no, don't look at that garden bed. Don't look at that garden bed. They're embarrassed. But to me, a garden bed full of weeds is still awesome. I mean, come on, look, it's living stuff. It's stuff that's growing, stuff that's going for it. Might burst into bloom or have its own little flowers or own little seed pods, and it's a place kids can dig, and it's probably inviting wildlife in. So even a bed full of weeds is good. And then, of course, you can break out of the garden bed box and just plant herbs and plants and all sorts of stuff everywhere. But a garden box is a good starting small. Another project, how about a hill? And I'll say that, it certainly does not have to be an adult-sized mountain. It's a kid mountain. So it doesn't have to be as big as so you think it's a mountain. It could be just 2 feet tall, 3 feet tall. I'll say during COVID, I had like a hole digging challenge, put it out there to y'all. And so we did some hole digging in our backyard. And we just dug a hole, and we put the dirt, plopped it on, made a little hill. I mean, just a little bump, 1 foot tall by 3 foot around. So teeny. But I'll say that every time the kids were out there in the yard, where do they like to stand? On that little bump. So, yeah, when they're running, run up the bump, run down the bump. So just like a little attractive thing. So you could do it with dirt. You could get a dump truck load, topsoil, fill soil. You could get a pickup truck load. Or you could have that mini bump. Or you could do it with wood chips. In Ithaca, there's a huge mountain of wood chips the city Department of Public Works grinds up and we can all help ourselves. So you can make a wood chip mountain. Tree service places have that kind of thing too. Maybe you can get it delivered. Yeah. All right. So there's some projects with loose parts, and there we go. Natural playscapes. All right. I'm curious if you have questions about it, so you can email me some questions at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. And speaking of questions, here are some questions from you. 3 questions here, and then we'll let you off the hook. We live in a desert. Not many trees or woodsy plants. What else can we use? Now, I've worked with people in deserts before and had this question come up a lot of times. Because, when you see images of natural playscapes on Pinterest or in our dreams and books and everything, often they're kind of like, green maple leaves and green grass and sunflowers and gardens and, stuff that looks more like it's from New England, right? Yeah, kind of. That seems like stereotypical, but what if you live in the desert? And I have seen people in the desert try to make green grass and plant northeastern, New England-y trees. But we don't have to do that. No, and really, I believe that, that's not necessarily the direction you go. If that's the direction you're going, okay, great. But I believe that your play environment should be a reflection and a connection to where you live, where your children live. If they're by the beach, it should be beachy. If they're, in the woods, in the mountains, it should be like that. But if you're in the desert, what if your play space was deserty? And one thing I love about the deserts is the desert floor. I like that term, the desert floor. And it's like a combo of sand and dirt and rock and what does grow in your area. So I like the idea of a natural play space in the desert that might have a topography that matches, your desert terrain. And then it has it's the desert floor. So children as if they're in the desert themselves. put them there in a safe way. And so are there plants that like it there? Whatever it is. You can have shade if you can't grow the classic shade trees of the Northeast. You could have your sun sails or gazebo areas for shade. But I say, have the rock, have the sand, have that desert floor stuff. And that's great for your children to explore. There's a beautiful book about kind of adventure play and nature play in the desert called Roxaboxen. Roxaboxen. R-O-X-A, Roxa, B-O-X, box, E-N, Roxaboxen. And it's about the story of children kind of creating their own nature play area in the desert by their house. Yeah, love it. Okay, next question. What types of sheds or storage is recommended for outdoor materials and tools? In some ways, whatever storage you can get your hands on. Now, if you can get like the classic, like 8x10 storage shed, that's awesome. If you have room for that, or if you have money for that, they can be a little pricey. But I think that is a great way to go, first of all. And when you think about what you're spending your money on in your outdoor space, a lot of people think, okay, we're spending on equipment, we're spending it on swings, we're spending on trikes. Okay, that stuff. And they might think of a shed as an extra thing, kind of secondary. But I kind of think of a shed as primary almost. And like if you didn't have any equipment, but you had a shed, and then that shed was filled with all your loose parts. Mud kitchen stuff and trikes and hula hoops and balls and boards and plastic dinosaurs and, on and on and on. Like that is the pizzazz. That's the great stuff. So maybe you had no equipment. Maybe you have no natural play space, but you had the storage shed for loose parts. That's a great way to go. Now, another way, besides having just kind of the big central play shed, is to have satellite, small little storage units. And they could be like little storage benches, kind of tucked in here and there. Or it could be like milk crates, or like plastic outdoor garbage bins with holes drilled in so they don't collect water. And I like this idea of having smaller storage kind of where you need it. So near the sand pit, you have a little storage bench, and that's where you have the buckets and the shovels and the bins and the sifters. Same thing with near the mud kitchen. There you have a little storage area there. Or if you have an art area, you have storage there that has art materials and chalk and paper and, the squirt guns filled with food coloring water. I don't know. So you can kind of think about that, just having little storage areas all over the place. And here's the last one. My licensor will not allow pea gravel accessible to children. How sad is that? The children love to play with rocks. Yeah, this is another one of those funny ones because, okay, so this person, their licensor is saying no pea gravel. But other places, pea gravel is what they use as a fall surface under play equipment. Like, seriously, all across Canada, if you're Canadian, you know what I'm talking about, pea gravel. That is like the fall surface of choice up there. I think the wood chips freeze, they think, or and they have there's reasoning, but it's different than in the States. Like some people have pea gravel, but not everybody. But in Canada, I see it more pea gravel than not. So in that sense, it's like pea gravel is like what you're supposed to have. But here's the licensor saying, no, you can't have pea gravel. And so this is more one of those conversations that the next, if the licensor says that, the next word should be, well, why? Why? How come? Tell us why no pea gravel? And if they're like, well, if it's age appropriate or developmentally appropriate or babies putting it in their mouths and stuff like that, they could have some reasons, but they also might just have those reasons of that they make up in their head of throwing it or chipping teeth or in the eye or in the mouth or, and okay, that's legit, but it's only half the story, right? the risk benefits. Okay, those might be the risks. Those are the things that could be little hazards. But what are the benefits? I mean, if you love pea gravel, I mean, if you talk to Canadians, I think they don't like their pea gravel that much. But pea gravel can be great because maybe you can't have sand. I've worked with elementary schools that can't have sand for the mud kitchen, but they can have pea gravel. So it's like a loose fill material. And I'll take any loose fill material over no loose fill material. So again, it is having the conversation with licensing. And rocks, maybe it's not pea size. Maybe you want bigger ones, bigger rocks. If your children love playing with rocks, maybe you work with the licensor to think, okay, what size rocks? And maybe they might be more worried about baseball size rocks. So maybe you have bigger rocks that are more pumpkin size, so children aren't throwing them, but you have to roll them. It's a pea gravel for giants, right? So it's all kind of what you feel comfortable with, thinking about how you're managing the situation, how you can prove to your licensor, you show them this is intentional, this is mindful, and here's how I'm supervising and taking care of it, taking care of business. Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. Natural Playscapes, episode 3. Thanks so much for listening. Here beside 6 Mile Creek in Ithaca, New York. And wherever you are, I wish you good luck. And if you have questions or comments, you can email me at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. All right. Play on.
All right. Thanks for listening. Do you have a comment or a question? Email me at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. You know I like talking about this stuff. And maybe we could use your question on a future podcast episode. As always, I have some free goodies for you in the show notes, including my outdoor loose parts guide. Fun stuff in there. And so I wish you the best in your outdoor play adventures. And when it comes to adding nature to your yard, or loose parts, or saying yes to risky play, my favorite motto is dream big, start small, and never stop. Oh yeah. Woo 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 woo. Let's do it. All right. Have fun out there.